Hello, everyone. My name is Carl Payeur. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Agri-Food Innovation Council, and I'll be your moderator today. Welcome to our virtual summit on agri-food research and innovation, looking ahead to 2025. We're very happy to count you amongst us today. I would like to start my remarks by thanking Osler, Oskin, and Harcourt LLP, Farm Credit Canada, AgWest Bio, and Smith Petrie, Carr and Scott Insurance Brokers for partnering with us on this event. Thank you. Today's panel focuses on presentations from Canada's Innovation Superclusters and the Strategic Innovation Fund. Presentations will focus on key priorities related to innovation and collaboration as they look ahead to 2025. Before we begin with the presentations, I'd like to make a few technical notes. First one is that the chat bar will not be active for the attendees. That being said, you're welcome to ask your questions using the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Also know that if you see a question that's been asked by another attendee that you like, you may upvote it in order to move it up in the queue. If you would prefer to ask your question verbally, please use the raise hand button that's located right next to the Q&A button. Once you're identified, you'll be invited to unmute yourself to ask your question. Now, before I introduce our panelists, I will invite Ms. Andrea Johnston, Assistant Deputy Minister for Innovation Canada at AIC, to say a few words. Andrea has led the delivery of new programs under the Innovation and Skills Plan, including the Innovation Superclusters Initiative, Strategic Innovation Fund, Innovative Solutions Canada, and the Accelerated Growth Services. She's had an extensive career at AAFC, where she held the position of Director General for Sectoral Development and Analyst covering livestock, grains, horticulture, dairy, and food processing. Andrea, thank you, and please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, Carl, for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here to talk about the federal government's support for innovation in agriculture and in the agri-food sectors. I'd like to begin my remarks by acknowledging that I'm living in the Ottawa-Gatineau region, so I'm on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Nishnawbe people. As many of you know here, I don't have to say how important the agriculture sector is to the Canadian economy and a key source of export revenues and the livelihoods for many Canadians. This was recognized when the Government of Canada included agriculture in one of its 6 economic strategy tables in 2017. And these tables originated for Dominic Barton's report that also highlighted the incredible importance and future potential of the agriculture and agri-food sector. As well, in May 2020, the Industry Strategy Council was launched to assess the impacts of the pandemic on key sectors of the economy. And when the Strategy Council released its report in December 2020, of the 9 recommendations, there was a significant focus on the Canadian agriculture and agri-food sector, including it being one of the pillars of Canada's new industrial strategy. Among other things, the council called for investments in the competitive areas such as the value-added transformation of raw goods and the development and commercialization of innovative bioscience products and processes, as well as increased digitization to improve productivity, including the acceleration of broadband investments and increasing digital technology adoption. So many outside of government have focused on the incredible potential of the agriculture and agri-food sector. And within government, innovation, science, and economic development programs like the Innovative Superclusters Initiative and the Strategic Innovation Fund are key efforts to show and to support the agriculture sector in its growth. Both programs were launched as 2 signature initiatives under the Innovation Skills Plan. And this marked a significant departure from Canada's approach in innovation. Previously, Canada focused on traditional R&D as well as supply side support for sciences and universities. But given the significant continued low levels of business R&D investments, there was a desire to have a new approach to innovation. Superclusters are considered a big, bold bet in Canada. Never been done, certainly never been done on the scale that we are trying to mirror in terms of the life sciences cluster in Boston or the high-tech Silicon Valley in the high-tech Silicon Valley. The Superclusters is a first program of its kind, just launched with $950 million over 5 years to incent large-scale collaboration among industry leaders, SMEs, and post-secondary institutions, and it's to develop and scale high-potential technologies in Canada. We also call it a co-investment model. That is, the federal government, through the Supercluster organizations, invest money on a one-to-one basis with industry. Again, something that where we feel is different in Canada because we feel industry-led demonstrates where the scale and promise of these technologies are. We undertook a competitive process to determine where the supercluster should be, and we selected 5 based on Canada's existing and future competitive advantages. They are digital, protein, advanced manufacturing, scale AI, and oceans. And these are large amount of money, new way of doing things in business, so under a lot of scrutiny. And as of March 31st, Superclusters have approved more than 400 projects worth over $1.42 billion and involving more than 1,300 partners, over half of which are small and medium businesses. The program is on track to exceed the target of exceeding the program's target of 1-to-1, with a total co-investment of over $1.24 billion, which includes more than $855 million from industry. The superclusters have engaged over 6,000 members across all 5 superclusters, again, already surpassing the original target of 830 members. And as of March, they're on track for over 6,000 jobs created, which makes them on track to meet the 550,000 jobs in the next 10 years. I have a problem with numbers today. I know Bill Greuel, the CEO of Protein Industries Supercluster, Bill Tam of Canada's Digital Technology Supercluster, and Kendra Mcdonnell of the Ocean Supercluster will give you a really great glimpse into what those superclusters are doing and the impactful projects across Canada, and in particular in the agriculture sector. In addition, I mentioned there was another signature initiative called the Strategic Innovation Fund, and that supports large-scale transformative and collaborative projects, generally over 10 million in requested contributions in all sectors of the economy. And again, this was another significant shift when we moved into the Innovation and Skills Plan, as previously funding was generally geared towards aerospace and automotive, and the Strategic Innovation Fund is now available to all sectors across Canada. In December 2018, the Strategic Innovation Fund launched a new competition for national initiatives under automation and digital technologies, particularly in the agriculture and agri-food sector. This competition reflected the priority themes of the Agri-Food Economic Strategy Table, such as increasing innovation and seizing value-add opportunities, adopting technology, and advancing digitization. In July 2019, 2 projects were announced for funding because they ranked the highest in terms of key program objectives to accelerate innovation for the benefit of Canadian agriculture. Carrie Wright of the Canadian Agri-Food Automation and Intelligence Network and Barbara Miller of the Canadian Food Innovators, who are both participating on this panel, will provide you an overview of their CIF network, which again is a combined total of just close to $80 million. And I look forward to hearing more about these networks. In budget 2021, we made a significant investment in what we call the Net Zero Accelerator. It was initially launched in December 2020, but received additional funding. So this $8 billion initiative will support the transition of Canada's economy towards a low carbon future through projects that advance innovation, technology adoption, and the commercialization of new clean Canadian technologies. The agriculture sector will clearly play a role in the Net Zero Accelerator, as the sector accounts for approximately 10% of Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions, and large-scale projects that help this sector decarbonize can apply for funding through the Net Zero Accelerator. Budget 2021 also outlines the government's plan to finish the fight against COVID-19 and ensure a resilient recovery that will create jobs and prosperity for Canadians. It focuses on Canada's competitive advantages and ensures that Canada is well positioned to meet the demands of the future, including the transition to a net zero emissions economy. In particular, from an agriculture and agri-food sector, the Strategic Innovation Fund received an additional $2.2 billion in the budget to support innovative projects across the economy, including in the agriculture sector. Additional funding was also available to the Superclusters, and these investments will help support sector recovery, sustainable growth. Budget 2021 also proposed the creation of Canadian Digital Adoption Program, which will help small and medium businesses, including farms and food processing operations, to adopt new digital technologies. Digital technologies have the potential to improve food safety, reduce the environmental impacts of agriculture and food production, and more news will be forthcoming as we continue to design this program and consult with key stakeholders. As the world moves towards a greener global economy, Canadian companies can develop and lead in clean technology solutions. Canada's agriculture sector has enormous potential to scale up these solutions. Budget 2021 also announced an additional $200 million for the Agriculture Climate Solutions Program run by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. These projects will target projects accelerating emission reductions by improving nitrogen management, increasing adoption of cover cropping, and normalizing rotational grazing. These are just an example of a strong commitment to the agriculture sector, a continued growth area, an area where we see exemplified expert growth and a commitment to a clean recovery. Thankfully, you don't have to trust me on this. You can hear the best part of my job is just getting the work directly with these innovators and the organizations that support them. And you'll hear an excellent set of panelists who will tell you about the ways that our programming is having an impact for Canadian businesses in agriculture and agri-food. Thank you, Karl.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this overview and your presentation. I'd like to now briefly introduce each of our panelists. Bill Greuel is the Chief Executive Officer of Protein Industries Canada. Bill saw firsthand the opportunity for growth in Canada's agriculture industry, and in his role as a CEO, he's helping Canada's plant protein sector realize its potential by leading the development of Protein Industries Canada's programs, resources, and initiatives. His efforts have also helped make the Supercluster an instrumental player in the plant protein landscape. Our next panelist is Kendra Mcdonnell, the CEO of Canada's Ocean Supercluster. Kendra is responsible for driving innovation and growth in the ocean economy. Together with a team working across 6 cities in Atlantic Canada, she's focused on changing the culture of doing business in the ocean, increasing collaboration across ocean sectors, and Canada's global reach. Barbara Miller is Interim CEO of the Canadian Food Innovation Network. She is an experienced food industry professional with public and private sector experience. She was previously Division President of Alt Food Parmalat and Category Director of Marketing with the Campbell Soup Company. She has also served as a Deputy Minister with the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development and Trade and Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Administrative Officer at OMAFRA. Next, Bill Tam is a co-founder and COO of Canada's digital technology Supercluster. Bill is recognized as one of the preeminent leaders of the BC tech sector. As a lifelong entrepreneur, Bill has been actively involved with technology and startups as a founder, executive, investor, advisor, and board member for the past 20 years. And then last but not least, Carrie Wright is CEO of the Canadian Agri-Food Automation and Intelligence Network. The combination of her grassroots upbringing and a food science specialization led her to the Beef Information Center, where she spent 10 years discovering innate abilities in marketing and business before leaving as the National Product Development Manager. So thank you to all of you. I will now ask each of our panelists to deliver their presentation before we move to the Q&A session. Mr. Bill Greuel, please go ahead.
Thanks, Karl. I'll just share my screen and get it up here before I start. So hopefully everyone can see that. Thanks to the AIC for having me on today. It's certainly a pleasure to talk. I want to share a little bit about our thinking at Protein Industries Canada around the development of a long-term strategy for Canada's plant-based foods, feed, and ingredient sector, and some of the things we're thinking about as we think about a horizon out to 2025. So for those of you who don't know much about Protein Industries Canada, we really believe that Canada can be a global leader in the plant protein industry. And I'll talk a little bit about the market opportunity and the size that we see. But before I get there, I'll just ground us in some of the work that we've been doing at Protein Industries Canada. Andrea gave a really good comprehensive overview of where the innovation superclusters are as a whole. For us at Protein Industries Canada, our technology project budget is about $360 million. We've had great success partnering and leveraging funds out of the private sector on $129 million of PIC investment, leveraging $229 million from our industry sector. And I think it speaks to some of the points Andrea was making about the growth opportunity that exists in agriculture as a sector, and in particular, plant protein. Just a really quick hit on our project pipeline to date. This really gives a sense of a couple of things. One is we invest in what we call a value chain approach to innovation, everything from plant breeding to production agriculture to processing and the development of new and novel food products. And we're invest across a number of crops. So green represents investments in peas, blue represents investments in canola, other pulses in purple, and then the x-axis is when we expect to see commercial products in the marketplace. So you can see, on the bottom right-hand side, a plant breeding project with Corteva where we're increasing protein content. Likely won't have commercial products until 2023 or 24, but some other projects that are very close to commercialization, Merit Functional Foods, for instance, or some of the processing work that we're doing with companies where we'll actually be yielding products into the marketplace, both on a B2B as an ingredient and also direct to consumer products that will be hitting store shelves in 2021. So this is just a bit of an overview of the scope and scale of the investment portfolio that we have. And just to ground the audience in the fact that we take very much what we would call a value chain approach to the investments that we're making in innovation. So about 6 months ago at Protein Industries Canada, we started thinking about the future of the organization. As you can see from the bubble chart here, we're essentially committed all of our funds. And we have a pipeline in behind this that's quite strong, and probably another $200 to $300 million worth of projects that we're looking to develop and eventually support. So we started really thinking about the evolution of Protein Industries Canada and what it is that we needed to do as an innovation supercluster. And it became quite evident that that actually wasn't the right question. And the question that we needed to ask is, what does Canada as a nation need to do to capture a significant portion of what will be the growth of the plant-based foods market, pick a time frame, 10 years, 15 years from now. And so we've started working on the concept of a national strategy for the long-term development of Canada's plant-based foods market. And that all kicked off with some market research work that we did with Ernst & Young, trying to think about and tease out what the global size of the plant-based foods market is. And if you're following this sector, you'll know that in addition to the work that we commissioned with Ernst & Young, there's been reports by McKinsey's and Barclay and a number of different firms. Boston Consulting Group came out a few weeks ago. The market is large, and I'm not sure that the absolute number is important. I think what's important is the directionality and what underpins the growth of the plant-based food sector. And so we know that 10 to 15 years from now, the market is going to be extremely large in terms of value, upwards of $180 billion Canadian, just for the alternative meat market. When you start to add in things like alternative dairy, alternative seafood, egg replacement, it's not unreasonable to expect this to be a market measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars 10 to 15 years from now. I think the important thing that we did and the important question that we asked of Ernst & Young, however, was what is the volume of crop needed to satisfy the alternative meat market 15 years from now? That's the table on the right-hand side of this slide. So in order to satisfy a $180 billion alternative meat market, the world is going to need to process an additional 66 million metric tons of crop. And just for comparison's sake, for people who are not maybe totally familiar with the scope of the agriculture sector in Canada, we produce about 90 million metric tons of crop production on an annual basis, and we process about 20 million metric tons of that crop. So we are exporting 70 million metric tons, either for domestic use or into foreign markets. The vast majority of our crop is being exported as whole seed. And so, if you look at the volume of crop the world is going to need just to satisfy alternative meat, you start to get a sense of the scope and scale of the industry and the infrastructure that we need in processing capacity to satisfy that. And just to ground people in a few numbers again here, peas, which is really a crop that's taking off in terms of processing because of the nutrition and functionality and the brand image that it presents in global markets, is estimated to require 17 million metric tons of peas to satisfy the alternative meat market out to 2035. Now, again, for comparison's sake, we produce about 5 million metric tons of peas in Canada on an annual basis. So again, you get a sense of the scope and scale and the size of this industry, and the compound annual growth rate measured around 14% over the course of the next 15 years. So quite an exciting place for us to be. I think that leads to the next important question is, what do we think Canada could capture as a percentage of that marketplace? At Protein Industries Canada, we've been talking with our members and stakeholders. We think it's reasonable and achievable that Canada can capture 10% of the global plant-based food market, and that creates an additional 25 billion in annual sales. So just for the numbers here, 180 billion was the alternative meat market. If you add in alternative dairy, alternative seafood, egg replacement, fortification for the baking sector, it's very easy to see that this will be a market that is at $250 billion by 2035. So we think we can capture 10% of that. Just for comparison's sake, again, Canada represents about 3.3% of the global agri-food market. So we think 10% of the plant-based food market is certainly punching well above our weight. But if you think about the fact that we have raw material and access to innovation and some of the work that we're doing in collaboration with our members, we think it's entirely possible that we can drive to an additional 25 billion in annual sales in the plant-based food market. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we ladder up to that 25 billion and then give you a line of sight into what we think we need from an innovation perspective in Canada to drive there. There's probably three areas where we will get increased value for the sector. One is just ingredient processing capacity. I said today we process around 20 million metric tons of crop production in Canada. In order to sustain a business of 25 billion in plant-based foods, we think we need to process an additional 6 to 7 million metric tons of crop in Canada. And that is no small feat. There's been some really exciting announcements made in Saskatchewan recently with an increase to canola processing. But just to ground the audience, 6 million metric tons of processing capacity requires about $10 to $12 billion worth of capital. So there's about a $4 to $5 billion lift as we move from commodity to ingredient. The second place where we're going to drive value is improving ingredient processing efficiency and value. That could be things like extracting more protein out of canola meal today, or it could be improving processing efficiency of dry fractionation in peas and increasing the value of existing processing capacity. We think there's about a $2 to $3 billion lift there as well. And then the third place is to increase plant-based food manufacturing. As you move from commodity to ingredient, there is, of course, an economic lift, but the real large lift in terms of value comes as we convert those ingredients into finished food products. So we think in the third bucket, there's about there's going to have to be about a $15 to $16 billion lift there. And that's really moving the ingredients through not only to ingredients, but then further converting them into finished goods. So then that leads us to the long-term strategy around the development of Canada's plant-based food market. We're building this out around 3 pillars: innovate, scale, and prosper. I've only had time to speak to the innovation pillar today. We truly believe that innovation will underpin the growth of the plant-based food sector in Canada. We're talking about developing new novel processes and technologies and food products that don't exist today. And so really innovation will underpin the growth of the sector. And I'll just talk about 4 outcomes that we're driving at under the innovation pillar and highlight some recommended actions that you'll see Protein Industries Canada talking about in the near future. First outcome under innovate is that we're really trying to drive at Canada becoming a hub for plant-based food innovation. We know that we need to increase investment into diversified consumer-focused plant-based foods and innovation. It's really critical for us because we produce crops at scale like peas, lentils, hemp, and some other crops like canola that no other jurisdiction globally produces at the scale that we produce. And so thinking about how we utilize those ingredients in plant-based food products from an innovation perspective is really critical. There's elements of having to align public sector research to better support ingredient manufacturing and plant-based foods production. In Canada, there is a lot of focus on what I would call the left-hand side of the value chain. That's plant breeding and production agriculture through public research institutions. We have to make sure that those investments are aligned to better support downstream ingredient processing and food manufacturing. I cannot get too far in a conversation about what Canada needs to do to support growth of the agri-food sector without making mention of regulatory modernization. I think here we chose these words very deliberately, that we must signal to the world that we want to accelerate and enable the development and commercialization of plant-based foods in Canada. Some very specific recommendations here around things like service standards for novel food determination, consistency in mandatory and discretionary fortification and labeling. And we're contemplating the creation of a center of excellence in regulatory to help SMEs navigate the regulatory system, but also to do research work in support of regulatory change. So that's something you'll see coming from Protein Industries Canada in the not too distant future. Third, we need to make sure that we're recognized as one of the most sustainable sources of plant-based foods and ingredients in the world. This is really thinking about building on some of the opening comments from Andrea about helping the agri-food system in Canada transition to a lower carbon economy, but also thinking more broadly around the UN Sustainable Development Goals around zero hunger, good health and well-being, responsible consumption. So much of what we need to do in the agriculture sector to reduce carbon footprint and provide a line of sight to consumers who want more information about the food they're consuming is built around developing the traceability systems that will allow for the tracking of product through the value chain and capturing data around the crop input products and the carbon footprint. So we've actually made some very significant investments on the digital side to create this concept around chain of custody to make sure that we're capturing data and can support sustainability claims that our customers are asking for. And the fourth outcome we're driving at under innovation is that we're a global leader in the conversion of research and innovation to commercially successful products and services. And so really this is about business mentorship and working with post-secondary institutions to build programs that help support entrepreneurship and maximize the commercialization of IP. We really need in Canada to get better at developing systems that funnel public sector IP to entrepreneurs and allow for successful commercialization, and really work with Canada's university and college system to develop programming aimed at educating the workforce ready to participate in ingredient and food processing. So I've got just under a minute left. I'll just leave a slide up around our membership. If anybody is interested in a further on conversation, we really feel that we are covering both the value chain and the geography of Canada with our members, and lots of opportunity to talk about the future of the plant-based food sector, not only from an innovation and project perspective, but also if there is interested members to just make connections within our ecosystem. So Karl, that's 15 minutes from me. I'll leave it at that, and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thanks very much, Bill, for your thoughts. Really interesting presentation. I'm sure we'll get quite a few questions from the audience on your thoughts.
Thank you.
I'll ask Kendra if she can please go next. Kendra.
Excellent. So it's a pleasure to be here. Maybe I'll start with just coming to you from Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'd like to acknowledge that the lands on which we work are in the traditional territories of Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit. So with that, I'll just share my screen here. Hopefully you can see that okay. Okay, so I thought I'd spend just a few minutes chatting about where we are with the Ocean Supercluster and perhaps a few of the projects that are probably, I think, maybe of more interest to this audience. So the Ocean Supercluster, I'll start maybe with a little video if I can get this to work, and this tells a little bit of the story of what it is we are trying to do.
With the longest coastline in the world, fourth largest ocean territory, and significant Arctic territory, Canada's biggest asset is also its biggest opportunity. Our ocean story has a long history that has helped shape us as a nation, providing a source of food, energy, transportation, business, and a way of life. Today, in the face of a $3 trillion global ocean opportunity, we are answering the call for sustainable economic growth. Striving for balance and expanding ocean opportunities while also addressing ocean health. We are building solutions to shared ocean challenges for the global market, developing cutting-edge ocean technology, facilitating greater connectivity, increasing data exchange, expanding talent, capability, and diversity, and making this the best place to start and grow an ocean company. And we're doing this by bringing ocean industries together in a way that's never been done before. Leaders in fisheries, aquaculture, offshore resources, transport, defense, marine renewables, bioresources, and ocean technologies are working together to rapidly innovate, commercialize solutions, reach global markets, and grow the ocean economy. Together, we are advancing Canada's position as a global leader in ocean. Canada's Ocean Supercluster, changing the way ocean business is done.
So one of the things that does make the Ocean Supercluster unique is that we are really focused on cross-sectoral collaboration. And so we have 13 sectors, some of them are listed off here. And what we're really starting to see is the power of those sectors coming together and working together differently. And what that allows is the opportunity for some of our small and medium enterprises to scale their solutions, not only into one sector, but into multiple sectors around the world. We are very focused when we think looking out to 2025, some of the key things that we're really trying to do with our ocean economy for Canada and provide leadership around the world is to make it more digital. So we are seeing more and more, just like many of the traditional sectors, a digitization of the ocean sector. There's lots of opportunity there's lots of data, there's lots of opportunity to collect data. I think there's only about 10% of our ocean floor that is actually mapped. So there's just a tremendous amount that we just don't know. And new technological advances are allowing us to get more access to that information. Certainly more sustainable. So ocean health is one of the biggest challenges. It's very much tied into climate change. Every second breath we take comes from the ocean. We rely on the ocean in terms of absorbing carbon. You can see what's happening in terms of whether it's ocean acidification or sea level rise, or what's happening in the Arctic in terms of significantly rapid impacts of climate change, and all of that is affecting our ocean ecosystem. An ocean economy that is increasingly inclusive. And so we have a very traditional industries in ocean where we are underrepresented in terms of gender and other underrepresented groups. And then when we combine that with technology that has some of those similar challenges, and we look at the future of ocean technology, we have a lot to do in terms of making sure that we are as inclusive a workforce as possible. And then when we overlay some of the significantly complex challenges that the ocean is facing, we really do want to attract as much diversity of thought as possible into that conversation. Collaborative, which we talked about, and then to be increasingly world leading. And so the global ocean opportunity is projected by the OECD to be a $1.5 trillion opportunity between now and 2030. It is expected, the ocean economy is expected to outpace global growth in any other parts of the global economy. So there is a significant opportunity there. And you look at where Canada sits. Canada's ocean economy is about $36 billion, and we're about half of the world average in terms of our contribution to GDP. So if you think about just the opportunity to get to the world average with our contribution, and then to grow with the projected global growth, which that $1.5 trillion represents a doubling of the global ocean economy, there is a significant opportunity for Canada to grow our Canadian ocean economy as part of that global growth. We talked about ocean health already, but that is definitely one of the considerations. Any solution that we're developing needs to be positively contributing to the overall health of the ocean. And we are seeing that ocean technology, as I mentioned, is allowing us to get farther and deeper than ever before. And while every generation, I think there's a video from the 50s that also says they're getting farther and deeper than ever before, which was also the case, we are now able to get, to the furthest depths and breadths, and be able to use autonomous vehicles to get to places where we can't send people. And so we are truly able to explore everywhere, and we just need to be aware of our footprint as we continue to increase our breadth of reach in the ocean. And there is certainly a compelling reason, not only in terms of ocean health and what that means for humanity and biodiversity, but also from a business perspective. If you look at the high-level panel on sustainability, a healthier ocean actually is a more productive ocean. So we should be able to get 6 times as much protein from the ocean if we are able to manage our oceans more sustainably and get them back to being much more healthy. So there's certainly a tremendous amount of focus on that in terms of the opportunity for a sustainable source of protein, but an increased source of protein with a focus on ocean health. So just in terms of a few of our projects that I thought might be of interest. So in the digital space, so the Ocean Aware project really captures, it is our largest project and really captures what we're trying to do from a supercluster perspective. They have 11 different collaborators. They have ocean technology, they have fisheries, aquaculture, energy, they have small, startup, large. They're working with 2 universities as well as with DFO. So that's really all, you got government and academic and large and small, sort of all coming together and working towards a solution. In their case, it is a fish tracking solution, really to be able to improve the fish health monitoring as well as fish movement, to get better predictive fishing, to get better monitoring of fish health when it comes to aquaculture, and also to be able to understand the movement of fish around subsea structures in terms of being able to understand that and make different planning decisions going forward. Our integrated operations and real-time analytics project, Bill spoke a little bit about the importance of traceability. That is equally important in terms of aquaculture space from egg to plate. And so what this project is looking at is really analytics in the aquaculture space to be able to get more real-time information and to be able to get more and more precise decision-making around aquaculture. So there is a couple of technology companies, one that is focused on imaging. They are actually a subsea camera capability, fish tracking capability, as well as an overall infrastructure around real-time communications. The Talibot project is in the fish processing space. So it's on land related to ocean, and really looking at bringing artificial intelligence in, again, to that traceability space to be able to reduce waste. So they're really looking at ways to be able to increase yield and reduce waste and improve efficiency of operations when it comes to fish processing. The sustainable solutions side, our DeNova project was actually announced last week, and DeNova is looking at being able to capture methane gas, convert to methanol, and then use that methanol as one of the inputs into fish feed, so sustainable fish feed for aquaculture. So they are looking at sort of trying to provide one of the most sustainable sources of aquaculture feed. Mara is in the omega-3 space, so they're actually looking at increasing working to expand nutritional omega-3, the nutritional omega-3 market, and very specifically have a microbe that comes from the Bay of Fundy. And then in terms of inclusive solutions, I won't spend as much time on this, but we have several projects that are really looking at, so our Ocean Allies project is really looking at the current face of the ocean economy from a workforce perspective, to understand what are some of the barriers to be able to be part of the ocean economy, and looking at the next phase of that will be looking at ways to be able to address those barriers and measure impact to really understand what steps are working and which steps are not. And our Indigenous Career Pivot pilot, we have an Indigenous working group. And one of the problems that they identified was it was very difficult to be able to move into a career in ocean if you had not previously worked in ocean. So this is a skill sets matching between companies interested in Indigenous workers and Indigenous workers interested in a career in the ocean economy. And we now have several that are working in that space. So we continue to look at other ways, and Blue Futures Pathways, I might as well mention that while I've got the slide up, is actually looking at engaging students. So they just are about to launch or have launched their portal, which is meant to help increase awareness for students from 14 to 30 in terms of the opportunities that exist in ocean. I wanted to mention our Ocean Startup Project, thought this might be of interest. So our Ocean Startup Project, one of the challenges that we have very specifically in ocean in Canada is we have a lot of startups, and so, we have a lack of startups. And so if you don't have enough startups, then it's very difficult. If your top of the funnel is not as wide as you need it to be, then it makes it very difficult to scale up. So we really felt that this was something that we needed to tackle from an ocean perspective. And so we launched our Ocean Startup Project about a year ago. It has 3 pieces to it. And again, Bill talked about, that commercialization focus. So the lab to market part of that program is actually working with researchers to help them understand what it takes to be able to commercialize their solutions. And so we had 17 teams in round 1, and they're just doing the applications for a new cohort for round 2. Creative Destruction Lab, which exists across the country, but now has a specific ocean focus in Atlantic Canada, and about 75 of the companies they attracted are actually from around the world. And then the third piece is our Ocean Challenge. So our first Ocean Challenge generated 158 companies from around the world with 14 finalists, and we are just in the midst of our second Ocean Challenge. So if you have some ocean ideas, we would welcome them. The applications are open until June the 1st, and those prizes go up to $200,000 for a moonshot solution. So the last couple of things that I will say, the blue economy is a global conversation. And so I mentioned the high-level panel on sustainability. Canada is one of the members of that panel, and they're really looking at sustainable solutions. They've issued a number of blue papers in terms of the opportunity in food, in terms of the opportunity with climate change. There's lots of interesting reading there, but there was also an ocean action agenda that was approved just before Christmas that Canada has committed to. We are in the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. In fact, there is a workshop with DFO this week around looking at Canada's role in that, and Canada committed to that back in, I believe it was in Nairobi in 2018. Canada itself is working on its own blue economy strategy, so we haven't had one for about 20 years or so, is my understanding. So that is meant to come out in the fall, which is in the DFO is in the midst of consultations for that. So if you have some thoughts on what the blue economy strategy should consider, certainly feed into that process. And we are, increasingly seeing the blue economy is an area of interest around the world. There are more and more hubs and different activities and investments that are happening in the blue economy. For example, India just launched a significant blue economy strategy at an event a couple of months ago. So the last thing I'll say is just if you are interested in getting more information, we were very lucky. We had Amazon Prime, did a bit of a feature. It was our first Future Code episode in Canada, and it was focused on the future of oceans, and particularly some of the supercluster projects. And here are some other places that you can find us and find more information on our projects. So with that, there's just a quick video on our stats, and I will finish up. And that's it for me. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Kendra. So much of agriculture happens on land that it can be easy sometimes to forget the opportunities that exist beyond our coast. So thank you very much for that presentation. I'll turn next to Barbara. Barbara, please go ahead. Barbara, I'm not sure if you're on mute.
My apologies. First of all, I'm very pleased to be able to join today. I think I might be the new kid on the block when we look at both the networks and the superclusters. And as I was listening to both Bill and Kendra's presentations, I'm hoping that a year from now, I will be able to come back, or my successor will be able to come back and present some of the exciting projects and results that we see already from the superclusters. For those who may not be aware, this is very recent news for the Canadian Food Innovation Network. It was actually formally launched last week. And so we were able to confirm that we have a funding agreement with ISED through the Strategic Investment Fund. And we're very much looking forward to rolling that out very quickly nationally across the country. Certainly, so I'll just go back and say what we do see ourselves as Canada's gateway to food innovation. So it is called the Food Innovation Network. And as we build ourselves going forward, we certainly see ourselves playing a key role in accelerating innovation across Canada's food ecosystem. Obviously, we want to engage with players across the country, and we want people and organizations to feel that the network is theirs as we roll this out. When we speak about the ecosystem, we're talking about the food innovation ecosystem. I call this a bit of an eye chart, and I apologize to those. I will expand it shortly. First, I'll just point out that we have the food chain, the food industry, food chain, going from left to right across to the consumer. We have the agriculture and fishery industry to the left, and then equipment, ingredient, packaging companies, all providing inputs to food manufacturers. And you'll see that food manufacturers are sort of at the center of our food chain. I'll just zoom in slightly so to show that in fact, we're showing across the food manufacturers to grocery retail, food service, milk kit companies, right through to the evolving consumer. But of course, when we speak about the innovation ecosystem, there are many participants in that ecosystem, and that includes, again, includes things like the research innovation centers. That includes university, college, research and development. It includes the provincial food tech centers that we find in Canada. It includes accelerators and incubators. And I move down to talk about finance, investors, capital service, food tech companies, obviously other partners, and that includes the people on this table today that we see ourselves very much working in collaboration with as we move forward with the creation of the new Canadian Food Innovation Network. I would be remiss if we didn't point out what the sort of the end goal of all of this, end goal of all of this would be, and that is to really see our business, our industry elevate its business performance through innovation. So we actually want to see innovation ideas actually moving their way through to results that companies are experiencing and able to grow their business and increase their market share both domestically and also internationally as we go forward. So that will be a key area of focus as we build this out. Last year, we met with a large number of people within the industry, and again, from that ecosystem. So food manufacturers, food retail, food service, packaging companies, ingredient companies, research scientists. And we asked them for their advice and in terms of what the network itself should be focused on going forward. And what we heard loud and clearly is there was very much a desire to be able to connect with other innovators. So we've heard so many stories, and I'm sure a number of you on this call have witnessed it as well. A company is sitting in Vancouver, BC. They have an innovation challenge. They're looking for someone who might be able to help them with that issue. And they don't necessarily know the other players within BC, let alone in other parts of the country. So that ability to connect, to understand who's working in what area and who might assist, and who might they collaborate with, that was one of the opportunities. Certainly they talked about uncovering opportunities. So just hearing and seeing ideas, we heard this from MNEs as well as SMEs. The desire to uncover opportunities and knowing and sharing information pre-competitively in terms of what the trends are, what are people working on, and sharing what's happening internationally as well as nationally. The collaboration piece was critical, and we certainly will be building that into the project funding component of what we will be doing going forward, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And just facilitating investments, access to capital, access to funding in partnership with others through the VC world, as well as through other funding programs offered across the country. So our end goal certainly is to position Canada as a global hub for food innovation. I think Andrea mentioned the Barton report. So the Economic Strategy Roundtable for Agri-Food recommended the creation of a global hub for food innovation. Other countries are doing this. France has Vitagora. There is, of course, Food Valley in the Netherlands, New Zealand Food Innovation Network, as well as Australia. There are a number of very good models out there that we can learn from, but I think the key point here is that other nations are really putting a stake in the ground in this, and we plan to do the same. So that is sort of the what and the goal. Let me shift now and tell you a little bit about the innovation priorities that we see for the Food Innovation Network going forward. Again, as during these consultations, we did over 100 one-on-one interviews with people across the food ecosystem. Where we netted out were sort of three priority areas. One was agile and safe supply chains, and we'll come to that. That would include such things as the Internet of Things. It could include blockchain, traceability, all contributing to food safety and agile supply chains. Second area is food ecosystem sustainability. So this would include food waste. It would include packaging in terms of an area, a major focus of effort, I think, for the industry overall is to focus in on that. It would include circularity and upcycling. Really focusing on more efficient use of inputs, including energy, water, and carbon. So that would be the second priority area. And the third area is smart products and smart process development. Food tech really steps in and plays a role here. We would, the application of automation, robotics into the food processing side of the house is going to be, I think, a major focus of effort. Looking to increase productivity as well as emerging science on the new product side of the house. So those are basically the three priority areas for the new Canadian Food Innovation Network as we go forward. What I thought I would try to do fairly quickly with this slide is to talk about sort of the two key activities of the network. We're just in the process of building this up, but the first would be building the ecosystem itself. So building the network and really getting the players, knowing who the other players are in the system. And so I'll come back and talk about that, but we have putting a large focus of effort around building the network itself and enabling it going forward. The other key activity is the funding of innovation projects themselves. There are three project areas, and I'll come to those and touch on each of those shortly. So back to the ecosystem development, there's sort of three things that we're going to be doing. One is introducing regional innovation directors. We had referred to them at one point, performing the role of a concierge regionally. So we are going to be placing boots on the ground in 5 locations across the country. And their job is very much to know what is the regional food innovation ecosystem. Who are the players in the region and how, that again cuts across that entire food ecosystem, manufacturing, research, food tech, the entire stream, packaging and equipment. And they will be working very closely with other regional innovation directors across the country to make sure some of that networking across is happening and introductions and connections are happening. Second part is the Innovation Connector Platform. So this is, in fact, a 24/7 hub. I would call it a virtual hub, where our members can connect with each other directly. They can ask the regional director to help them do a curated search to help them zero in and narrow in on the kind of skill and expertise that they're looking for. We're going to be able to host host peer roundtables. I would call them collaboration arenas. So if there's a particular issue that's coming up a lot from particular members, we can host an arena discussion where all the players that are interested in that topic can come together. So that's the platform. And then there will be the, I would call them, how do we keep people engaged, member outreach? So that would include such things as, that would include webinars, it would include hosting a lot of content as well that people could reach out best practices. We'll be hosting events around that front as well as an innovation summit ongoing in terms of how we're going to reach out to folks. Shifting now to the funding side of the house, the CFIN, the Canadian Food Innovation Network, will be playing a very active role in actually funding projects. There are sort of 3 project areas that we'll be launching and introducing probably as early as this fall. One is grand challenges. So if you reflect on those 3 innovation priorities, there will be approximately 2 calls for proposal per year that will be themed around one of those innovation priorities. We will eventually work through all of those innovation priorities, but there will be grand challenges. We'll be looking for collaborative research and commercialization projects that will involve obviously a number of players within the food ecosystem. The second area are pitch tanks. So they are what they sound like. We will be issuing 2 pitch tanks per year. Again, we'll be calling for proposals. This is very much focused at the SME, sort of early stage growth companies that will be making proposals and requests for funding. And we'll be bringing other funders to the table to review and participate in those pitch tanks. The last area is the Innovation Booster Program. So this booster program is very much going to be an open call for proposals, and it would be for those enterprises that have an innovation challenge that they are working on, and if with a smaller amount of funding, would help them accelerate instead of leapfrog in terms of the acceleration of that project coming to commercialization. So those are the 3 project areas. They will all be shared, looking for matching funding as we go forward with industry and with the other players to match the money that we're putting forward. So those are where we're headed. I unfortunately can't talk about them today in terms of results, but we will be launching those this fall. I just wanted to touch on, as this is relatively new, who should be involved with this new network. We will be certainly seeking membership, open to membership. Membership will be free as we introduce the new network. You can see the list: food manufacturing, food tech digital, food service, grocery retail, ingredient suppliers, investor. I see the list. I don't think I need to read it. Packaging and equipment suppliers. So we really are looking at bringing together again that ecosystem in its broadest sense as we start to move forward on this. And that's. I thought I would pause there. I would say that the website is now live. It is cfin.rcia.ca, which you can see in my email address. And also, I would just put out a flag that we're in the process of trying to recruit the new, what I would call the inaugural CEO. And we look forward and welcome anyone who's interested to go to our website. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Barbara. It'll be interesting as you continue to map out the ecosystem, as you build those networks and continue funding the projects that you've identified, to see how that continues to evolve with time. So again, thank you very much for your presentation. Before we move on to our next presentation, I would just like to remind our audience that if you have any questions for speakers, that you are welcome to click on the Q&A button and ask them there, or to use the raise hand button. And following our last presentation, we'll turn to the Q&A session and ask them to our speakers. So thank you again. And I'll now ask Mr. Bill Tam to give us his presentation. Bill. Bill, you might be on mute. Oh, there we go.
Thanks very much, Carl, and thank you for the organizers for having me on this conference. And just to acknowledge that I am currently in Vancouver, and it brings great pleasure to indicate that our team is based on the traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. And it's our pleasure to kind of introduce the digital supercluster to you today. There's a few things I do want to bridge off of on the previous speakers' conversations, particularly around sort of what our model is. And if I can maybe go to this for a moment. Let's see. So our supercluster, tell me if I am advancing the slides. Well, there we are. So as Bill and Kendra had indicated, we are a new model for innovation. It is really about harnessing the power, the collective power of collaboration. For us, a lot of the focus is around digital transformation, the strategic sectors in the Canadian economy. And ultimately in this pursuit is really about unlocking a global leadership opportunity in the development of digital technologies that underscore the transformation process that most industries are going through. Just by way of background, I think the World Economic Forum did a recent study in terms of where organizations, enterprises stood in the digital transformation journey. And there really is a digital imperative that is underway, of course, accentuated and further accelerated by the effects of the COVID pandemic. But digital ecosystems will represent more than $60 trillion of revenue by 2025, and more than 30% of all corporate revenue, 70% of new businesses and their value over the next decade will be through their digitally enabled platforms. And it's interesting because as they looked upon the readiness of companies for this transition, 87% indicated that they are experiencing gaps in the capabilities, and these will become more pronounced over the years. So it represents sort of a challenge and an opportunity for us here in Canada. I think globally, the data opportunity is more than $2 trillion in terms of digital transformation that's going to happen. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that Canada and Canadian companies get more than its fair share. Currently, I think we're tracking that we account for less than 1% of this $2 trillion annual market on digital transformation. And clearly, there's a lot of upside potential in what we're doing. For us as a supercluster, you know, as with all of our colleagues, we started with a regional focus, but have been able to foster a Canadian-wide presence with now organizations across the country. We have more than 1,000 organizations that are members of the digital supercluster, and they do span the gamut from startups to SMEs, large companies, multinationals, and then a lot of research organizations, universities, government agencies, and many of these are, of course, have a vested interest in how they can leverage digital technologies to affect their strategies and sort of their outlook for the future. Our collaboration model is really premised on this notion of bringing together a table of different expertise where, you know, at the center of all this is really the industry partner, the organizations that are seeking to adopt this capability. But intermixed with that are the lead technology companies that are building products and capabilities. There are co-development partners that are part of that journey. We insist upon having post-secondary institutions and research organizations as part of our projects. And then ultimately, there are technical service providers that provide the necessary integration into the customer environment to make sure that it satisfies what they're looking for from a solution standpoint. And our role is really to convene these sorts of collaborations and provide a co-investment approach that is helpful not only in mitigating some of the risk elements of this, but also in ensuring that the collaboration unfolds in a manner in which all the expertise that's brought to the table from all the participants is fully respected and governed accordingly. So a sampling of our projects, we now have more than 80 projects in our portfolio, and our portfolio is a little over $300 million in value. Similar to the protein industry Canada Supercluster, you know, we are now sort of fully committed in terms of our current fund. We have a pipeline of another $200 to $300 million in projects that we expect that we'll really have opportunities to leverage what's been done as foundational elements. But you can see our focus has been in 4 key areas for technology, and then 1 in the talent area. So we've focused on digital health, natural resources and the environment, a number of projects in accelerating digital transformation of industry. We pivoted pretty significantly to support Canada's response to COVID-19. And so we have a portfolio of projects that intersects between digital health and society. And then ultimately we're trying to, we have a portfolio of capacity building projects and skilling projects that are there to build capabilities in our workforce, and also to help with the reskilling that's necessary for many of these industries as they seek to build digital expertise within their companies. So let me talk a little bit about some of the areas that we see as opportunity for digital innovation in agriculture. There's probably 3 areas in particular that I want to speak to. You know, I think our previous presenters had talked about the global food challenge, which is how do you build a pathway to feeding the world and yet do it in a way that's ultimately sustainable. And so we see sort of 3 areas of opportunity. One is, you know, the supercluster model lends itself to exploring complex challenges. That really is about bringing different stakeholders to the table to lead to significant breakthroughs in agriculture. What that really means in our lingo is developing analytics-ready data and tools that can correlate a bunch of different activities in field, on the terrain and field, in crop and soil, and ultimately looking at the innovation that can empower areas like regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and I'm going to talk about 2 projects in particular that we're quite excited about. You know, so here's a quick map of Google Trends. If you take a look at regenerative agriculture over the years, it's certainly a term that's in vogue now. And I think we've got 2 projects here that I just want to spend a few minutes on. One is a project that's led by Terramera. That's an ag tech company that's based in Vancouver. And it's a precision agriculture project to improve crop health. And, you know, the thesis here is it's really about how we can more sustainably provide for remedies to increasing crop diseases and issues that pertain to that without needing the sort of the chemical And you can see the portfolio of partners there. You know, we have everyone from Agriculture Canada to universities and colleges like Trent and SFU and University of Saskatchewan. And then we have folks in the genomics side who are key in kind of developing sort of precision analytic tools in the crop space. So, you know, here's sort of the situation. We export more than $7 billion worth of wheat every year. And as the climate conditions have continued to warm the planet, so diseases such as wheat rust have spread further north, and they create an increasing threat to our production. And at the same time, this is leading to increased use of pesticides and brings along with it all the environmental risks associated with that. So in this case, what I can do is actually show you that over a 7-day period, you can kind of see the effects of wheat rust. And so the project is actually focusing on leaf rust disease, which is caused by certain fungal infections and attacks, obviously some of Canada's most important crops.
I think Bill's connection got interrupted. We'll give him another 5 or 10 seconds to see if he comes back online, and if not, we'll move to our next speaker and then come back to Bill after. Okay, I think we'll just pause Bill's presentation for now, come back to it at the very end, and I'll ask Kerry if you would please go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Can everyone see my shared slides there?
Not quite, no.
Okay. Like that.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, great. Good. Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm really excited to be presenting. So as Barb mentioned, she's kind of new kid on the block. I've been at Cain for about 4 weeks now. So really excited to be presenting today, and just wanted to certainly talk to you a little bit about what the Canadian Agri-Food Automation Intelligence Network is all about. And we wanted to acknowledge that, you know, we are Canada-wide focused, but we're certainly headquartered in Edmonton. We wanted to also acknowledge that we're home of many Indigenous peoples, including the following, and really our traditional Treaty 6 territory, traditional gathering place, traveling route, and home of these Indigenous peoples. So wanted to talk to you about Cain's 3 pillars, and they really do include our ability to connect, create, and cultivate within this sector. And our platform allows for investment in agri-food, focusing on agriculture and identifying technology applications to really create jobs and drive innovation and productivity. We create technology solutions, and we really are looking at the ability to address some of those most challenging problems facing Canada's agri-food sector. And I'll talk a little bit about those as I go forward. And we cultivate relationships among the sectors. We've heard a lot of the presenters talk today about the ability to connect across many different platforms, and Cain is really focused on doing that similarly with really bringing an understanding of relevance to the advancement of Canadian agriculture's ability to adopt technology and how we look to support that. Our value proposition for Cain is really built on network to support research and innovation. Cain is part of CIF and ICED sponsors, and we're based on reimbursing expenses. And we contribute up to about 50% based on reimbursement possibilities within these projects. We really are about growing the economy and supporting SMEs. And in our projects, we do require that we have at least 2 SMEs to help really encourage and support the Canadian agri-tech sector. And obviously being Canada-wide, we are certainly based in Canada, and we support those. And really, you know, we certainly want to use this money to help and support technology and the agriculture sector. So we're a small team that we're diverse, approachable, friendly, and professional. And we are really geared to yielding improved outcomes among the agri-food and value chain sector from gate to plate. And we do focus mainly on agriculture. Within that, the Federal Government Strategic Innovation Fund, our application under ICED, we are looking to build those partnerships and relationships. And really, to give you some sense, this began in March 2019. Cain was successful in this application process with ICED, and we got the go-ahead in July of 2019 with our sister organization, CFIN, that Barb heads up. And we were awarded 49.5 over the next 5 years. And we really are mandated to focus in 3 main areas: the robotics and automation, data-driven decision-making, and smart farms. And I'll go into each one of these in detail. The automotive robotics and automation aspect is certainly one of the areas that we feel that can really support the agriculture sector facing shortages and, in labor. And certainly this has been, exacerbated by COVID and really has made things some challenges. So we're looking to look at opportunities of robotics and automation to help support that labor need. and really provide more producer certainty with whether that be in platforms of, milking, harvest crops, sow crop, livestock. We cover all of that area, and we want to provide more processor safety. As you can imagine, in slaughterhouses, it's a cold environment. There's some risk there, in terms of what they're dealing with and breaking animals. So we really want to look for automation and robotic solutions that can help support that. And under data-driven decision-making, there really is, as we all know, with the population growth and where we expect to be in 2050 with that, and our ability to feed those 9 billion people, we need to really do more with less. So smart and precision agriculture really depends on good, well-analyzed data. And as you can imagine, there's lots of platforms for data, but we need to take a look at that data, understand really good data, clean data, and be able to layer that to be able to offer informed decisions. These informed decisions will help increase the return on investment. And certainly robotics and automation platforms are AI based. So we require that reliable data to be able to move forward. Smart Farms is an interesting platform for Cain, and really the importance here is to help validate new technology right on the farm. So we would cover broad acre crops as well as horticulture, as well as livestock. So all of these related initiatives, and we're looking to link that into a smart farm that actually takes what we've learned in research and be able to put that forward in real world environments on the farm. And this really helps to demonstrate that new technology to producers and allow them to really be able to see how it can be applied and how they can take that and see what difference it can make on their farms. And certainly it gives us, an ability to educate the next generation of agricultural professionals as they come forward. Right now we have a platform of 3 smart farms. We're looking to expand that all across Canada, and we want to vary the different platforms as well, so that we can take a look at what that information is coming from the smart farms and see how it can support farming going forward. Right now, wanted to kind of just mention, we are kind of fairly new in this game, but we've been very quick to get our projects off the ground. So we were able to have our closed competition that really involved our 8 core partners, our 8 founding partners. And we were able to submit this and put forward 9 different approved projects with 40 different project partners for a combined value of $3.5 million. And we really, our contribution is a bit over 15 million. And we are going to be starting announcements on those in late May. So I won't get into all the details right now, but coming soon, you'll hear details about those projects. It's very exciting. We also moved very quickly, with a skeleton staff and signed official agreement with ISED that came forward. We were able to launch a nationwide launch of our open competition in December of 2020. So there we received 42 proposals. These came from across Canada, and 15 are right now advancing into the full proposal stage. So we expect those winners of those submissions to come mid-June. And our final approvals will be late summer. So we'll be moving forward into that. And we expect another competition that will be happening in the fall. So our competition process really is fairly simple in terms of we do a call for submission. We ask for a single page outline for the project registration form. We get expressions of interest, which is a bit more detailed, and we evaluate that both internally and externally by reviewers. And then we request full proposals that come through to us. They're fairly comprehensive, and they're evaluated internally and externally by our advisory board, which is very fundamental. We choose reviewers both here in Canada and abroad, depending on what the subject matter is. So we've got a very good complement of reviewers that help us move things forward.
Sorry, Carrie, just to jump in very quickly. I don't think we're seeing your slide beyond the introduction slide.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know why
just...
it's not advancing. Let me just see. Sorry.
That's okay.
Is that working now?
It is now, yes.
Okay, apologies. Well, it was really great, everybody. Let me just see if I can advance this properly.
Okay.
Here we go. I've kind of covered most of this, but is this moving forward?
Yes, thank you.
All right, I will just kind of jump in through our projects and get into our smart farms and then our closed competition and open. So you can see from our closed competition of the 9 approved projects, there is an array of our core members, our core partners that we started with. And then our next competition, our open competition, really did span further and broader across Canada. And as I mentioned, we'll be looking for approving those late summer. This is the process that I just kind of I've outlined for you all in terms of our call for proposals. We have those submissions come in, our expression of interest, and our full proposals going forward. So really our other activities for Cain really center around the building of a network. We've mentioned a number of times from some of the other people here, Pick and Stephen in particular. And what we want to do is really promote what we have. Companies have identified certain needs, and we want to make sure that we can bring together the agriculture and tech sectors so that we can make sure that we can help find support solutions for them. We are bringing together researchers and SMEs and multinationals as well, but we want to really build on a database to help companies focus on specific needs of understanding, and we can bring together companies and academia institutions as well as not-for-profit organizations to help move that forward. And we also want to make sure that we can provide value to those people in our network. And we're looking to host and participate in a number of events in the ag tech sector, and really collaborating with folks like Emily on the data side, Saf, Elric, and Pick, as well as Stephen going forward. And also, of course, Alberta Innovates hosts their adventures in September, and we'll be looking to do a couple of presentations with that as well, so that we can really talk about the technology side and how it can benefit agriculture. And that really kind of wraps everything up. Sorry about that with the slides, but if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Carrie. A very insightful presentation, and thank you so much. We'll go back to Bill Tam to wrap up his presentation before losing him a little bit earlier. Bill, if you could please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks very much for that. I apologize for that, Carl. Can you just remind me which slide I may have cut out on?
It was the one with the video on it.
Oh, I see. That probably was a little bit too much for the system to handle. So, okay, let me go back to that one, and I promise not to play the video. Let me just go back to that for a moment. Okay, great. So ultimately, I think the Terramera project is really about 3 parts. It is robotics and machine vision, to use machine vision to follow the disease progression automatically. We're using genomics to follow the changes in the gene expression by the host of the pathogen, and then machine learning to do the interpretations and the iterations as quickly as possible. So the combination of these will build new technologies and new tool sets that not only manage it in the case of wheat rust, but ultimately as a new pathway for other pest management formulations. So that's one project that we're excited about. The second one is a project that is currently in development that we've selected, and it's a project that really is about building the world's first interactive planning platform that's going to combine data in the field about soil, water, terrain, weather, and really serve as a advanced planning tool for farms and just agricultural processes in general. And the nature of this one, really, there's 2 big considerations. One is, if you track over the last 90 years, farming revenue, you see the revenue has grown significantly over that time period, but the actual profitability of farms has not. In fact, there were periods in the last decade where it was quite negative. And so the inputs are growing in terms of costs, but you know, the ultimate gains economically for farmers has not been keeping pace. At the same time, you see on the right-hand side just the growing issues with GHG emissions associated with agriculture. And so those two pieces are what's driving, I think, this kind of project initiative. And ultimately, it is intended to support a new sort of platform that will empower decision-making by farmers in terms of their operations. And there are three parts to this. One is to build the digital twin of the farm. It's really automating the characterization of what's in the field. The second part is to build the data commons framework that actually connects different data elements amongst different farmers and fosters the reuse of data, integration, the visualization, characterizations, and does that at scale across a number of different farms. And then ultimately, this will serve as an operational planning platform for individual farmers and their operations. So if this is successful, the idea here is not only are we better stewards of the land, but we can do it in a manner in which the economics for farmers improves, and that ultimately we have a lesser environmental footprint in our agricultural practices. So those are two examples, and thank you again for the opportunity to share the stories. If you're interested in joining us, just come visit our website. You'll learn more about our projects, and we look forward to working with you. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Bill. And once again, thank you to all of our speakers for their presentations today. I invite you, members of the audience, to ask your questions using the Q&A button or the raise hand button if you prefer to ask your questions verbally. Maybe to kick off, Bill, Bill Greuel, in your presentation, you've talked about the work that you're doing toward a national strategy. I would be curious to ask a little bit, to ask you to expand maybe a little bit more on that, and maybe also as a sort of more general question to you and the rest of our panelists. I think we hear from time to time, like the Barton report is something that is that comes back pretty regularly. And there are some good things that have been achieved through or following the Barton report, most notably the creation of Superclusters and also the accelerated capital investment initiatives. And I'm wondering if, as tied to the idea of a strategy also, are we in need of a new roadmap today, or what are some of the elements that we still need to continue looking at that are part of the Barton report, and are there other elements that need to be refreshed or added on to it? So Bill, if you could please go ahead, and I'll ask any other speakers that would want to jump in to do so after.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Karl. I think, you know, this concept of developing a national strategy, and I don't want to put words in the mouths of my colleagues, but I think as we built innovation superclusters, or, you know, Cain and CFIN, it becomes clear very early on that in order to move the needle in terms of the economic growth that we want to achieve and accomplish for our respective sectors in Canada, it's far bigger than an innovation supercluster or, you know, an organization like Cain or CFIN to do on their own. So the idea is really enlisting the value chain to help us grow the sector. And so, you know, on Wednesday, we're actually doing, maybe Thursday, I should get my date straight, a rollout of the Ernst & Young report. And we're going to be joined by a venture capitalist out of Alberta and the head of the global protein business for Ingredion out of Chicago to talk, you know, specifically to dig into this question, Karl, of what needs to be done in Canada. You know, just to comment on the Barton report, I think, you know, there's an example of a report that really crystallized people around a vision of what we could do in Canada's agri-food sector from a domestic value and from an export value. It's challenging though, right? Because Ambassador Barton was talking about agriculture writ large, right? And so you can't dig into the level of detail that you want and need to. You have to stop at, we need to modernize the regulatory system. We've actually got the good fortune of working in a relatively narrow space of the agri-food sector, which is plant-based foods, feeds, and ingredient. So we can make some very specific recommendations about what needs to be done from a regulatory standpoint. So, Is there still stuff left to do under the Barton report? Absolutely. But I think, this hopefully will be a very good step towards helping Canada achieve those overall growth targets in the agri-food sector by focusing in really specific actions and activities on the plant-based food side.
Thanks very much, Bill. Would anyone else like to comment on the question?
Just might add on to that, Bill certainly outlines the whole complexity and really the people around this panel today just show the various elements, and it really is something they need, collaborative going forward, because there's just so much involved, and I think we're well positioned and well set up to do that going forward, which is really exciting.
I would just underline that for Kerry as well. One of the things we heard when we spoke to the food innovation ecosystem was help, right? Please help us navigate because there are superclusters, there are networks, and obviously there's intersection on the work that we're doing. And I think we've started these discussions already amongst us. How do we avoid duplication? How do we maximize value for the actual, for the company, the food company or the ag company? How do we really build and make this investment that's been made really make a difference?
Thank you. Another question I had, and this is, I think, a commonality across the superclusters or actually every panelist today is, and to pick up on a comment that Barbara made earlier, the importance of building a network or collaboration in general. And I'm wondering if I could get each of you to speak to your perspective as to how you've seen collaboration evolve since the beginning of your project Greuel Supercluster. What are the challenges that you're observing with that? And also, are you seeing some overlap with other superclusters, for example? So let's start with Bill Tam, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, collaboration is at the heart of the entire Supercluster program. It's in my view, it's an explicit expression of intention that now permeates, I think, every program that the government of Canada is funding. The work that Barbara's doing, the work that Kerry is doing, and many other organizations as well. From the standpoint of how it's affected, the work, I think it really comes down to, do you get outsized benefits to the broader ecosystem by bringing actors together that are somehow kind of bringing their different expertise levels to the table? I think maybe the one foundational difference between how it's operating now in our superclusters versus perhaps how it was operating before was, my experience had been programs would say, can you name the partners that you're working with? And there was all sorts of good intentions. You'd get letters of support from lots of different organizations for some sort of pursuit that you were going to do. And that was collaboration, and I'll call it collaboration 1.0. And so our collaboration 2.0 is you actually create these multi-party agreements where there's not just the obligation from the one organization back to the funding agency. It's actually amongst everybody in that consortium. And so that puts a different risk level on it, and it puts a different level of commitment on it, but it actually fosters a different level of understanding at the same time. So post-secondary institutions working with industry in that capacity is very different. Small companies working with big companies in that capacity is very different. And I think one of the goals of the program was to look at the innovation supply chain and make sure that the actors all have a vested interest in all of that. And so maybe that answers the first question. To your second question, it's not so much overlap amongst our superclusters, but a recognition that there are complementary aspects to what we're each doing. So we're developing some expertise in digital, but there's no way we could have the same level of expertise in agriculture or in oceans that Bill and Kendra would have. And so, what we're trying to do is see where the cross leverage can be from a technical standpoint. But from an application standpoint, in some of the key markets that they're working on, we're comparing notes on a consistent basis.
Thanks, Bill. I'll go to Kendra next, and then Carrie.
Sure. So, I mean, I think what we've seen was collaboration was really easy to say, but then when we look at 13 ocean sectors, 4 Atlantic Canadian provinces, 3 Canadian oceans, and you start trying to bring all those cultures together and say, hey, can you just figure out how you're going to collaborate? It was not that straightforward. So it did take a little bit of time. We realized it really was a big culture change that we were trying to make. An oil and gas executive does not look like a fisheries executive, West Coast, East Coast, Arctic. But what we are starting to see is, and I think many of our projects would say, it was really hard to get going. It took much longer. In some cases, it was like herding cats. So take the example of the party with the 11 parties that were all trying to come together, but now they're feeling the power of that in terms of not only with the collaborators they have, but it's attracting new and different collaborators. They're getting lots of international attention in terms of what they're doing. And so now I think we don't need to sell the value of collaboration anymore. The projects themselves, when they talk about their own projects, they can articulate what the benefit is. I would say the last comment I'll make is from a pandemic perspective. It actually helped, I think, for us in terms of collaboration. So prior to that, you know, we were debating, do we have an event? Is it going to be in Nova Scotia? Is it going to be in Newfoundland? Do we bring it to Central Canada to try to get the West and the East? Do we do a West version, an East version? And that all went away when we could do virtual, and virtual really allowed everyone to connect. And I think it took away a number of the geographical barriers that people viewed as being really significant when it came to collaboration. So we're seeing more and more East Coast, West Coast collaboration, which is really exciting and multi-provincial. So that's been really powerful for us in terms of moving forward over the last number of months.
I just, you know, certainly like to just add on to what Bill was saying. I think, you know, as we look through these groups, it really is about complementary. And, you know, I think of the agriculture side, to me, it's one just big value chain. But, you know, when you start to say where you're collaborating with SMEs, you're going to get that perspective of how does this actually work in my operation. When you're looking with, you know, the research academia side, you're looking at possibilities that maybe they can't even envision right now. So it's an important balance and an important coming together as we go forward. You know, what is it that we could be doing on farm to, yes, be more profitable, be more productive, but also what does that mean to the next step? So if it's, you know, designing something that has more protein in it, or if it's, you know, Barbara, to the food processing sector, is it a consistent on-spec product that is a great benefit to the processor? What does that look like? And to the end consumer, what are they interested in? You could use an example of extrusion where, you know, starch plays a specific role. What does that product look like coming off the farm? And then how is it that more efficient when you're actually in the processing sector? So there is you know, a lot of alignment. And obviously, I think as we will be growing up all together, a lot of collaboration.
Thanks, Carrie. I'll ask Barbara to go next, and then we'll go to Bill last.
Sure, thanks. Sort of coming back to where I guess Bill started, and Bill and Bill. As we look at collaboration around innovation, the one thing that we hear over and over is innovation does not understand borders. And it doesn't understand silos. And so it behooves all of us as we work through this. I mean, NextGen, another one of the superclusters, you know, is working in advanced manufacturing with aerospace, with auto, with pharma. And, you know, what are the lessons learned there around automation and robotics that could be applied into the food industry? That's just an example. And then we look at, you know, digital, we look at AI. Again, these are incredible opportunities to bring expertise, you know, from the superclusters into bear. But the one thing that we're determined to do, and I'm sure all of us are, is to break down the silos and the borders. You know, an innovation idea doesn't only come from Canada. You know, there are others across the world. And how do we tap into that and leverage it? This is my comment.
Yeah, Carl, I'll maybe just add there's a few themes throughout the conversation. One is collaboration is essential, and it's easy to say and hard to do. But maybe just as a bit of a data point as to, is supercluster theory working? Is collaboration working? So if you take a look at our projects, anyway, I can't speak for the other clusters, but our project started out with 2 or 3 organizations collaborating. And as we've gotten better at building collaboration, as we've created and built trust amongst our memberships, and as we've gotten to build out better projects aimed at outcomes, the collaboration index, which is just a number that we made up, is consistently going up over time, right? So now we've got projects with 6 and 8 different participants. And so I think the investments are speaking for themselves that yes, this is working.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. I do have one final question that I would like to ask to everyone and no one in particular. One of the outcomes of innovation, for lack of a better word, is adoption by the end user. And I'm wondering if, from your perspective, you could speak about some of the resistance that you've encountered with time in terms of getting to adoption of innovation by producers or anyone else in the ag sector, and what did that look like, and what have you learned from those experiences? Is anyone interested in taking a stab at this one?
Yeah, I'll maybe just make a couple of comments. And so, that certainly is an issue and a challenge, especially, you asked specifically about producers today. And I mean, the amount of information coming at primary producers is just eclipsing anything that they can absorb. And so the challenge is, that's one challenge. I'll just maybe put this in the context of what we're doing as an innovation supercluster, though. And this is the really critical part, I think, about working with for-profit private sector companies, is that we're pushing closer to commercialization. And because we're working on a co-investment reimbursement model, there's none of us investing in technology that doesn't have commercial application and won't be commercially adopted. And so I think it's a really important, I don't think lesson is the right word, but piece of what we're doing at innovation superclusters right now, and organizations like CFIN and Cain, is this idea of working directly with private sector companies, and because they're not going to be putting money on the table without a clear path to commercialization. And so that, to me, is one of the things that really sets this program apart, and the investment thesis that we're employing.
Yeah, Carl, I might just add to Bill's comments there, because I think the very construct of our model and Bill's and Kendra's is about having the centricity on the adopter and to build the innovations based on their requirements and whatnot. So, as we've tracked it across the natural resources players, what we found was, from mining and forestry, because we have companies like Tech and Canfor that are part of our supercluster, it was a way for them to accelerate a series of things that may not have made the list of things that would have been top priority, but could leapfrog a whole bunch of other considerations in time. And I think that's perhaps the power of the supercluster, is to get people out of the incremental and into something that's more substantial. I think the one area of the supercluster of agriculture, which we found quite unique, is that the nature of farming is such that, the model itself, especially with independent farms, is one that doesn't immediately give yield an opportunity in the digital space for one proponent to be kind of the big consumer of all that. So hence the project that we are now funding with Verge and others is, how can you look at a method where you aggregate capabilities where the benefits now accrue to multiple parties at the same time. And then part of the consideration is, well, how do you incentivize people to participate in that? And so there's still a little bit of a secret to be unlocked there that we anticipate will be part of the journey in this particular project. But we're seeing lots of write-ups of how people are envisioning sort of an economic frame for agricultural pursuits, where you get a lot of independent farmers, and how do you add value to their operations and not detract, but rather, get them incentivized sufficiently to participate.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Kendra, go ahead, and then Carrie.
Maybe a slightly different angle, obviously, in terms of from an ocean perspective, but we do have lots of small fisheries. And so part of the challenge when we think about technology adoption is really the business model, like who is going to pay for it. So we all agree that traceability is a good thing, but how do you incent then from the very moment that you're pulling out of the ocean all the way through the process to actually who is benefiting versus who is paying and seeing the actual value of making that investment. I think the other thing, certainly from an ocean perspective, when the Supercluster first came together, we were very actually light on technology providers. I think when people thought about ocean, they thought a lot more about ocean science. So unless we had a company that had grown up very specifically to serve ocean, now what we're seeing is more and more sort of tech providers seeing the opportunity in ocean and the opportunity to pivot and or build an opportunity or a technology application specific to the ocean environment. So again, realizing more and more the benefit of technology and automation. And the last thing I think is the workforce of the future. So our traditional industries are actually struggling to be able to hire. So whether that's on the ship and some of the challenges that we've seen in the maritime sector, particularly with COVID, whether that's in the fishery and sort of renewing fishing licenses. So there's a real impetus, I think, to move towards automation to be able to maintain productivity and to be able to continue to add value in the future.
I would, just want to add that, with Cain's platform of smart farms, it's kind of like a extensive pilot, if you will. So it actually shows how that could be applied in the real world. So I think it's an amazing platform. When I was dealing in the world of launching new products, we, would think of being able to go out there just, everywhere. So being able to have that is, I think, very integral to the success of adoption. And, Kendra brings up a good point. When we're looking across Canada and the SMEs, I think the other piece of this is going to have that right size solution. So I think in many industries, automation technology might be implemented in a very large scale, and the costs tend to be large. Being able to either phase the approach or look at ways that, to me, success breeds success. So can we chunk this into manageable pieces so that it can be adopted on farm and throughout the value chain as it goes forward? I think those are going to be really critical.
Barbara?
I was just pausing when we're chatting about, what do you come across that's difficult to bring collaboration together. Anyone who has done some work with the food processing sector, I think appreciates that it can be very fragmented. There are a lot of SMEs as a percentage of the overall mix, and it is organized differently than agriculture in terms of industry trade groups and others. I think they're motivated, and particularly the SMEs are very much interested in the discussions. M&Es are coming at it from a different direction. They want to see what the SMEs are doing, and so they're actually quite incented to be at the table. And of course, pre-competitive versus competitive information, we have all of those challenges, I think all of us. So I'm intrigued to learn more with others in terms of how you can manage that. But we also have learned that around the food processors, the customers, their customers are a big piece of this collaboration as well. That's food retail, it's food service. There's lots of innovation pull that is happening from that side of the house, from the consumer, and I'm thinking of digital as an example. So we think we have to work on the incentives, I would say, to get all the folks at the table, but we're quite excited that at this stage food processing is in, and then how we build that out, we'll be working on that over the next number of months.
Very interesting. On that note, it's time for me to close today's panel. So Andrea, Bill, Kendra, Barbara, Bill, and Kerry, thank you so much for being with us today and for your presentations. Thank you also to all of our attendees who have been with us today. I would like to invite you to join us again on May 12th. So in 2 days from now, we'll have presentations from Canada's Agri-Science clusters and the Global Institute for Food Security then. So again, thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.